We're back.
We're not back. We're here for the first time.
Well, we're back on recording about the Camino, I guess. So we decided that since we hadn't been on for a while, and we do have a YouTube channel that has to do with the Camino, and we never really finished recording, that we would start up again. How fun is that?
Mm-hmm.
And we want to start from the beginning, which is how did we get there? So you want to start us off, Marla, because you're the one that started the whole thing.
Oh, well, I guess I would start by saying that, and I think you and I talked about this, the Camino has always been on my radar. I would say sometime in my adulthood, I became aware of the pilgrimage, and it always fascinated me on lots of different levels, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Mm.
I did bump into the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, and I was, I don't know how to say it, but that movie stayed with me for a long time. Just the all the little sub stories, and I thought it was just fascinating watching the characters' growth
Yeah.
throughout that journey. So it always was something that I was aware of, always sort of wanted to do it, but I never really thought I could do it. I had, along the way in my middle adulthood, I had some health issues that I just didn't ever think I would be able to work through to do something so strenuous. So it sort of just stayed on my mind. And I've always been fascinated by the spiritual element of it in and how many different forms that takes.
Yeah.
So, and I know some of that resonates with you in terms of, where you were with it all, but
Yeah. I think, well, it's funny because when you first asked me to go, there was a number of things that popped into my head. First of all, I had never even heard of the Camino. So that was that. And I don't know if I had seen the way before I had heard of the Camino. So it was, I think I might have obviously watched the movie after you mentioned it.
mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I had seen it before because obviously I didn't know about the Camino. But it was interesting when you asked me, and I think you remember when I was like, "Are you nuts? Like 30 days?" Oh, like the first inkling was we would be away from home 30 days, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so 30 days for me with a husband who's a 9/11 survivor with PTSD, haven't traveled in a long time, and then just being away from home and being on a plane without him. Um, Not scary for me, but I thought it was going to be an issue for him.
Yeah.
And you remember we had that conversation. So it was like, sounds like a great idea, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the movie and it was awesome. And then I was like, it's never going to happen. He's going to be a nervous wreck. It's just going to take the wind right out of my sails and it's not going to happen. And I think I came home like that day after religious ed and said, hon, Marla came up with this crazy idea. She wants me to go away for 30 days and do this trip. It's a pilgrimage. And I start explaining the whole thing. And his first reaction was, do it. Just do it.
It was so shocking.
That was the biggest shock of my life, initially. And then everything that came after that. So, okay, so now I really have no excuse, right? So then it's how am I going to take time off, from work and, running my own business and doing all this stuff and having all these responsibilities. And then it just snowballs from there. But I think the initial thing was, okay, I could try to do it. So let me just figure out how that's going to happen, and then my dad was sick
Oh,
too.
that's right. He
Remember
factored
he was
into that
going through
heavily.
surgeries. And So I had to leave him. And so it was a lot, but I think deep down inside, the way everything happened, I knew that I was meant to go.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, I, you know, we didn't know each other for that long. We would just, we'd see each other once a week in religious ed. You know, we hadn't really had like a friendship like that. I mean, it was you know, we had a church acquaintance, right? Acquaintanceship, I guess you could say, but it wasn't like a real tight friendship. So that was another thing. It was like, I know you, but I don't really know you. So,
Hmm.
right. Um,
Well, and that's, I think we should kind of maybe pause right there because and explain how we knew each other. So Vilma and I knew each other in the context of the Catholic Church.
mm,
She was a catechist, and I was an assistant to the director of religious education. So I interfaced more on the mechanics and stuff with the catechist. You know, if the catechist was out, I was there. If the catechist, I was the one collecting attendance records. So this is where you and I started to interact a little
right,
bit more.
right.
You know, kind of before classes, after classes. And the other element that we haven't really talked about there is that we're talking about kind of our, you know, first steps into this, but what even propelled our first steps is even a step back, and
Right.
that is our parish parochial vicar, Father Rayner, was someone who walked the Camino regularly. And I think by the time he had come to St. Stephen's and he had spoken to us, he had maybe done it maybe twice.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe he had done it once and he was going for the second
Going
time.
into the
But he was very enthusiastic. So when we spoke about it and I said something like, I'd really like to do, you know, and he was like,
Mhm,
do it, just go. And it just the same way that when Frank said that to you, it sort of
mm,
put me in that situation where I knew that I had to do this.
yeah.
And it's fascinating to me because I have spoken to a couple of people along the way, no pun intended. And there is always this point that you get to where you realize that the only thing holding you back is you.
Yeah.
And I want to, you know, there's all sorts of things swirling in my mind as I'm listening to you talk. But one of the things that is apparent to me now in listening to you speak and my own thoughts forming is how the Lord put you and I together
Never.
for
That's what I
this
was thinking.
journey,
Yeah.
because we were actually very complementary to one another. And
Mhm.
here's what I mean: in that I didn't have any problem being away from home for 30 days. You know, my husband was like, see ya, go ahead, see ya when you get back, whenever. Yeah, okay. So that was not an obstacle for me. I had kind of had it in my mind for a while. Um, my health issues were coming along to the point where I really knew that that wasn't a reason for me not to go. Um, but I don't speak Spanish, which
Mhm.
is not a requirement, and I don't want to scare anyone to thinking that it is. But it in going to a foreign country, it certainly doesn't hurt that you're with someone who speaks the language fluently, as Vilma does. So there was that.
Yeah.
So there was this kind of unique combination of the two of us who had we each had sort of breaks. I don't know how else to say it. Breaks in certain areas that the other
Yeah.
one didn't.
Yeah.
And so what happened is that they ended up meshing
Mhm.
together where we could fully support each other in, I'll handle this. I have no problem with this. You handle this. You have no problem with this. And it kind of came together for us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that that is um, really an important thing to think about if you're going to journey, if you're going to make this journey. You need to think carefully about your journeying partner,
Yeah,
wouldn't
definitely.
you say?
Yeah, I would say definitely. And I think the one of the other things that I wanted to mention is that just what you were alluding to is the idea that how we came together and how it just all happened, you know, and I think that's an important part. Like I think a lot of people get involved in doing it and don't really know what they're getting themselves into and just maybe want to do it just to do it and they don't really discern. I think discernment is a big part of it
Yeah.
because it's a big undertaking. It's a huge undertaking. And it's something that, you know, that could, I guess, work in a work in the opposite of what you expected it to if you don't go into it wholeheartedly having discerned whether you should be doing it or not. So
Hmm.
it's like what you said, Father Rayner said, "Oh, do it." It was like it's always been on your radar, and here you have someone that's saying, "Definitely do it," and you have this feeling that you really need to do it. And in my case, I didn't want to do it. I didn't know about it, but somehow, some way, it came on my radar. And just when I thought it wasn't meant to be, I get this amazing response from my husband, which I never expected, which was almost for me, it was like an instant discernment. It was like, well, this is not what I expected, and this is probably what I'm meant to do. And so I need to figure out a way to get there and how I'm going to do it. And but all of this, as they would say, all of the stars aligned as I started making my plan and trying to decide how I was going to do it.
Hmm.
Everything just fell into place.
All the crooked lines were made straight,
Yep.
and
And
it made it
so,
very obvious to us both
yeah, yeah,
that, yeah.
yeah. And I think if you go into it knowing, I mean, I think most of the people that go into it know that they're going on a spiritual journey, that it's not going to be easy. And it's just something that it's almost like, you know, you have to suck it up or just to stay in that to stay in that zone, you know, once you're there. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the idea that, and I know I experienced it. I don't know if you experienced it before the trip, but it almost seemed like right before we were about to leave, maybe a week or two before, was when like um my peace was being rattled. Like
Oh, I remember that. I
I was
remember
starting
that.
to get
Hmm.
like second thoughts, and I think it was like a fear or just like it was something that was happening that I just felt like something was telling me I shouldn't go. And I was almost getting to the point where like my foot was hurting, you know, and it was like,
Right.
oh, I think I fractured my foot. I'm not going to be able to go. You know,
Hmm.
it's like, and it's all these things. And I remember going to Father Rayner and speaking to him, I think maybe even going to confession, you know, and talking to him during confession about how I was feeling and thinking that maybe I shouldn't be going. And he kind of affirmed and said, like, this, that's not from God. So you need to figure out what you're doing. You know, you feel overwhelmed. You're being overwhelmed with your work, with your family situation, with all this stuff, with your foot, whatever it is. He says, how about you just take today off? Just take off and sit before the Blessed Sacrament and just give it to God. And it was like after I did that, I just felt like this peace came over me that I was like, wait a minute, he's right. Like all this stuff that I'm conjuring in my head about all these reasons why I shouldn't be going, it's that's not the case, you
Hmm.
know? And it's so I think it's important for us to kind of reiterate to people who are planning on going that probably right before you go, because the trip is going to be such an amazing trip, and because it's going to be such a journey it's a life-changing journey, you're definitely going to come up against some resistance.
Right.
And so you have to try to overcome that resistance to get to the starting point,
Hmm.
because it is a life-changing experience,
Yeah.
right?
And I also would say that a lot of us who do this journey, by our very nature, we're kind of self-motivated, self-starting people who are used to kind of just taking the bull by the horns and just doing stuff.
Mm.
And that's all great. You probably sense that I have a butt coming, but it just doesn't work in a trip like this.
Mm-mm.
There is this very strong element that one has to eventually come up against, and that is, it's just not all about me and what I want to do, because the trip and the circumstances of the trip are going to have their way with you. I don't know how else to say it. And the more pliable you are to what happens, the more enjoyable your experience will be. But the Camino doesn't lend itself to being fully controlled. Let's say that, right? You would agree with that?
Mhm.
Um,
I agree.
and so even though you may go in thinking, well, I'm going to do this every day and this every day, and I'm going to stop here and I'm going to stop there, it's just not going to work. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan,
Mhm.
which we could have a whole section just talking about that.
Yeah.
But it does mean that you always have to have this idea of being flexible
Yeah.
and understanding that some days it's going to rain and the forecast didn't call for rain. You weren't expecting rain. And some days it's cold, and and it's not what you expected.
Yeah.
And so um, there is an element of just accepting what the day gives you and enjoying that. And I'm not saying that the days are unpleasant
Yeah.
by any stretch of the imagination. What I am saying, though, is that they are very likely to be very different in reality than what you may have conjured up in your mind. Or if you look at some of our photos,
Mhm.
I mean, you would think this must have been 100% bliss.
Yeah. Like,
And it was beautiful. But yeah, look at the backdrop
yeah.
for Vilma. We went there. That's what it looked like. And it's hard not to feel, nostalgic about it. But it
Mhm.
also, I remember times when you and I would stop dead in a trail and peel off our shoes, our hiking boots, and our socks because our feet were hot
Yeah.
and we sensed a blister building. And
Mhm.
the only way that you deal with that is to cool off your feet immediately. So then there's that.
Yeah.
Um,
There's
and
a lot.
yeah, so you want to be flexible. You want to also not romanticize,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, definitely.
because it's rigorous. It's a rigorous thing.
It is. And it's I mean, hindsight is always 2020, but we talked about it while we were on the Camino, that it's a metaphor for life. The pilgrimage on the Camino is the metaphor of the journey of life. And so we have to be open in life, just as we do on the Camino, or on the Camino as we are in life. Life
Hmm.
is going to throw us some curveballs, and so is the Camino. But you know what? When we trust in the Lord to get us through, when we keep our eyes focused on the Lord, just as on the Camino, if we just keep our eyes focused on just that one next step that we get to make, you know, we we endure. And the Camino, you know, there's the famous saying, the Camino provides. The Camino always provided for us.
Hmm.
It didn't matter what we were going through. Somehow, some way, we got to where we were going. We'd get lost. We'd have blisters. We, whatever the case may be on any particular day, you know. Even I remember when we were going, uh, you know, again, planning, right? You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Well, we had our day perfectly planned where we were going to finally get to this final destination and attend Sunday Mass. Well, you know, it didn't happen that way. It wasn't as we planned, but somehow, some way, midpoint, we got to this one particular place that we had that wasn't even on our radar, where Mass was just beginning. And
Yeah, I
it was
remember that.
like, you know, and it was just when at that point where we had just surrendered to the fact that we probably weren't going to get to attend Mass on Sunday, right? And
Hmm.
so that says a
Hmm.
lot about surrender, you know. But there's
Yeah.
so much that we could talk about, but we'll save it for another time. But did you want to say anything else before we?
No, I would just say, you know, again, it's hard for us not to get ahead of ourselves
Yeah,
because the journey was so beautiful.
yeah,
But the thing to remember, if you're feeling like you're being called to the Camino, is you probably are.
yeah, yeah.
And but Vilma's point is it's a discernment. It's a process of really considering, and it's important to understand right up front that it's a long journey, you know, and we're used to things now in our culture that happen immediately. And that the beauty of the Camino is that it doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't even happen in a way that you know, what happens to you doesn't happen to you in a way that you even can really feel it, right? But changes are happening
Happening.
inside and underneath in all kinds of ways. And so it's important to, I think, to just be open to that idea, um, and to bring that into your discernment. And it's important to discuss it with people that you love
Mhm.
and who love you, because they are the ones that you're going to call upon to be the most honest with you in terms of the undertaking. Um, I know I was extremely well supported in that way, and I know you were too.
Yeah.
But we have known people along our journey who were not well supported by their family members,
Mhm.
and they didn't do well.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how much that support from half a world away means when you're on a journey like this.
Yeah.
So it's really important, I think, to enlist the people that you love into your plans and your
Mhm.
considerations and the whys, and and have discussions about it. It doesn't always have to be a solo venture. Um,
Yeah, you're right.
you
And
know,
I think like you make a good point, Marla, because the people that you love and the people that you're around the most, you know, husbands, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, family, whatever, but they know you the best. You know, not only do they love you, but they know you the best. They know what you're capable of, you know, and if they really feel like you're not able to, you wouldn't be able to do it, I think they would tell you, you know, or
right.
um or support you, or you know, in whatever way. But I think in reality, like, our support system knew that we were determined, that we were and we were also in a place spiritually where we wanted to take that journey. It was,
Hmm.
we knew it was going to be hard, but we understood what the journey was about. And so
Yeah,
knowing all that helped.
and I think back to a point that you made earlier. The Camino was originally a pilgrimage for common people to take to the cathedral in Santiago.
Mhm.
And, you know, imagine living your whole life and, you know, just making this journey would be the highlight of your life, to go to a cathedral. I mean, living in a time when that was so important to people. And it was a metaphor for those people of walking to the kingdom, right? Walking the journey to heaven. So getting to the cathedral for these ordinary people was akin to actually dying and going to heaven. And so the whole journey along the way was their life being walked out in front of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's I thought about that a lot. I continue to think about that, in that, you know, we are all walking through life and our goal is to get to heaven. And so the Camino, you know, sort of truncates this whole experience and says, all right, you wanted it, I'm going to show you what this is. So over the course of the next 35 days, we're going to intensify, you know, what does your whole
What
life
life
look
is
like?
all about. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So
Pretty cool.
I think that's, you know, if you take a step back and think about everyone's lives has this, you know, the ups and downs and the loops arounds and all of these things, which you say, well, that's the journey of my life. You know, I was going from here to here. So it's really so reminiscent of the fact that we're all on a pilgrimage, whether you do a Camino or not, you're
Right.
on a
You're
pilgrimage,
on a pilgrimage. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this is, you know, it's a really beautiful way to consider the steps that you're taking in your own life. And there are so many things that we talked about, you know, on the route that really, you know, we were so much in the mindset of a pilgrim that, you know, the idea of attachment to things that was all gone from us. That had been wrung right out of us.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll I'm sure that will come up later, but, you know, we were at the point where, you know, 2 sets of clothes, that's all I need in life, right? That's it.
So
Exactly. So, you know, it does, it works its way right into your way of thinking very quickly, because you're completely and totally immersed in it for that period of time.
yeah. Yep. So let's see. We'll end here. What do you think about maybe our next or our next videos or whatever? What we'll do is we'll maybe pick a word or discuss a word. You know, one of the words that just popped into my head as you were talking on the Camino, patience. Maybe next time we'll talk about patience. How it
And you know, the other thing, tactically speaking, we could probably spend some time talking about, how do you prepare?
yeah.
How do you prepare
Well,
for a
yeah,
journey?
let's do that. We just started with how did we get there? You know,
Yeah.
the discernment process, getting
Yeah.
through
Today's
the
been all about
discouragement and the
discernment.
resistance, and
Yep.
finally getting to the Camino. And then let's talk about, maybe next time we'll talk about prep.
Yeah, because I'm sure we
Beforehand.
have lots of funny stories about that. So
Yeah.
I know you were ragging on me forever about all the stuff that I was trying to bring. And yeah. So let's talk about
Yeah, we'll
that
do that. Yeah.
realistically. There are lots of videos and discussions about what to bring on the Camino,
Yeah.
but
Backpack, how big, all that good stuff.
getting there
Yeah.
is
Even
a
the training.
process.
Even
Getting
the
there
training.
is a process. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's part of letting go right there. That's kind of like your first stage. It's like, what do
Yeah.
you mean I can only have 2 pair of underwear?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think I think that would be a good
That'll be a good one. All right. So we'll do that next time.
one. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
So excited.
All right. Talk to you
When are we
later.
going back?
You know that's coming. You know
I
that's
know.
coming.
We know. We know.
All right. I'll
All
talk to
right,
you later.
everybody. Until next
All right.
time. Bye.
Bye.